Where Icathia once stood. My name is Axamuk Var-Choi Kohari Icath'or. Axamuk was my grandsire's name, a warrior's name. It means keeper of edges, and it's an auspicious title to bear. Axamuk was the last of the Mage Kings, the final ruler to fall before the Shuriman Sun Empress, when she led her golden host of men and gods into the kingdom of Icathia. Var is my mother, and Choi my father, one with an honorable history of service to the Mage Kings. I have borne these names since birth. My name is Axamuk Var-Choi Kohari Icath'or. Only Kohari is a new addition. The fit is new, but already feels natural. The name is now part of me, and I bear it with the pride that burns bright in my heart. The Kohari were once the life wards of the Mage Kings, deadly warriors who dedicated their lives to the service of their masters. When Axamuk the king fell before the god warriors of the Sun Empress, and Icathia became a vassal state of Shurima, every one of them fell upon their swords. But the Kohari are reborn, rising to serve the new Mage King and reclaim their honor. I bear their sigil branded on my arm, the scroll-wrapped sword. My name is Axamuk Var-Choi Kohari Icath'or. I repeat it over and over, holding on to what it represents. I do not want to forget it. It is all I have left. Was it only this morning I and the rest of the reformed Kohari marched through the streets of Icathia? It seems like a lifetime ago. The wide thoroughfares were thronged with thousands of cheering men, women, and children, clad in their brightest clothes and wearing their finest jewelry to honor our march. They had come to witness the rebirth of their kingdom. For it was Icathia that was reborn today, not just the Kohari. Our heads were high, my chest swollen with pride. We marched in step, gripping the leather straps of Rika shields and the wire-wound hilts of our curved Nimcha blades. To bear Icathian armaments had been forbidden under Shuriman law, but enough had been wrought in secret forges and hidden in caches throughout the city, in readiness for the day of uprising. I remember that day well. The city had been filled with screams, as baying crowds chased down and murdered every Shuriman official they could find. Resentment over centuries of humiliating laws intended to eradicate our culture, and brutal executions for breaking those laws, came to a head in one blood-filled day of violence. It didn't matter that most of these people were merely scriveners, merchants, and tithe-takers. They were servants of the hated Sun Emperor and needed to die. Overnight, Icathia was ours again. Sun disk effigies were pulled from rooftops and smashed by cheering crowds. Shuriman's cryptwork was burned and their treasuries looted. The statues of dead emperors were desecrated, and even I defaced one of the great frescoes with obscenities that would have made my mother blush. I remember the smell of smoke and fire. It was the smell of freedom. I held to that feeling as we marched. My memory recalled the smiling faces and the cheers, but I could not pick out any words. The sunlight was too bright, the noise too intense, and the pounding in my head unrelenting. I had not slept the previous night, too nervous at the prospect of battle. My skill with the Nimcha was average, but I was deadly with the recurved serpent bow slung at my shoulder. Its wood was well seasoned, protected from the humidity by a coat of red lacquer. My arrows were fletched with azure raptor's feathers, and I had carved their piercing heads from razored obsidian sourced from the thaumaturges, the magicas of earth and rock. Long runs through Icathia's lush coastal forests and along its high mountain trails had given me powerful, clean limbs to draw the bowstring and the stamina to fight all day. A young girl, her hair braided with silver wire and with the deepest green eyes I had ever seen, placed a garland of flowers over my head. The scent of the blossoms was intoxicating, but I forgot it all as she pulled me close to kiss my lips. She wore a necklace, an opal set in a swirling loop of gold, and I smiled as I recognized my father's craft. I tried to hold on to her, but our march carried me away. Instead, I fixed her face in my mind. I cannot remember it now. Only her eyes, deep green like the forests of my youth. Soon, even that will be gone. Easy, Axa, said Saijing's Keilring's Kohari Icathun, popping a freshly shelled egg into his mouth. She'll be waiting for you when this day is done. Aye, said Colgrim Abal Essa Kohari Icath'un, jamming his elbow into my side. Him and 20 others strapping young lads. I blushed at Colgrim's words, and he laughed. Craft her a fine necklace of Shreem gold, he continued. Then she'll be yours forever, or at least until morning. I should have said something to berate Colgrim for slighting this girl's honor, but I was young and eager to prove myself to those veteran warriors. Syjax was the beating heart of the Kohari, a shaven-headed giant with skin pockmarked by the ravages of a childhood illness, and a forked beard stiffened to points with wax and white chalk. Colgrim was his right hand, a brute with cold eyes and a betrothal tattoo, though I had never heard him talk of his wife. These men had grown up together, and had learned the secret ways of the warrior since they were old enough to hold a blade. But I was new to this life. My father had trained me as a lapidary, an artisan of gemstones and maker of jewelry. A meticulous and fastidious man, such coarse language was anathema to him, and unfamiliar to me. I relished it, of course, eager to fit in with these leather-tough men. Go easy on the lad, Colgrim, said Syjax, slapping my back with one of his massive hands. Meant as a brotherly pet, it rattled the teeth in my skull, but I welcomed it all the same. He'll be a hero by nightfall. He shifted the long, axe-headed polearm slung at his shoulder. The weapon was immense, its ebony haft carved with the names of his forebearers, and the blade a slab of razor-edged bronze. Few of our group could even lift it, let alone swing it, but Syjax was master of weapons. I turned to catch a last glimpse of my green-eyed girl, but could not see her amid the tightly packed ranks of soldiers and the waving arms of the crowds. Time to focus, Axa, said Syjax. The squires say the Shreemans are less than a half-day's march from Icathia. Are the god warriors with them? I asked. So they say, lad, so they say. Is it wrong that I can't wait to see them? Syjax shook his head. No, for they are mighty, but as soon as you do, you'll wish you hadn't. I did not understand Syjax's meaning, and said why. He gave me a sidelong glance, because they are monsters. Have you seen one? I was filled with youthful enthusiasm, but I still remembered the look that passed between Syjax and Colgrim. I have, Axa, said Syjax. We fought one at Pyke. We had to topple half the mountain to put that big bastard down, Colgrim added. And even then only Syjax had a weapon big enough to take its head off. I remembered the tale with a thrill of excitement. That was you? Syjax nodded but said nothing, and I knew to ask no more. The corpse had been paraded around the newly liberated city for all to see, proof that the Shreemans god warriors could still die. My father had not wanted me to see it, fearing it would inflame the desire to rebel that had smoldered in every Icathian heart for centuries. The memory of exactly what it looked like is gone now, but I remember it was enormous beyond belief, inhuman and terrible. I would see the god warriors later that day, and then I understood Syjax's meaning. We formed up on the gentle slopes before the crumbling remains of the city walls. Since the coming of the Sun Empress over 1,000 years ago, we had been forbidden to reclaim the stone or rebuild the wall, forced to leave the rubble as a reminder of our ancient defeat. But now, an army of stone wrights, laborers, and thaumaturges were hefting giant blocks of freshly hewn granite into place. With windlass mechanisms, I felt pride at the sight of the rising walls. Icathia was reborn in glory right before my eyes. More immediately impressive was the army taking position athwart the hard-packed earthen road leading into the city. 10,000 men and women, clad in armor of boiled leather, and armed with axes, pikes, and spears. The forgers had worked day and night to produce swords, shields, and arrowheads in the days following the uprising. But there was only so much that could be produced before the Sun Emperor turned his gaze upon this rebellious satrapy and marched east. I had seen pictures of ancient Icathian armies in the forbidden texts. Brave warriors arrayed in serried ranks of gold and silver, and though we were a shadow of such forces, we were no less proud. 2,000 Talon riders were deployed on either flank, their scaled and feathered mounts snorting, and stamping clawed hoofs with impatience. 1,000 archers knelt in 2 long lines, 50 feet ahead of us, blue-fledged shafts planted in the soft loam before them. 3 blocks of deep-ranked infantry formed the bulk of our line, a bulwark of courage to repel our ancient oppressors. All down our line, crackling energies from the earthcraft of our mages made the air blurry. The Shrimans would surely bring mages, but we could counter their power with magic of our own. I've never seen so many warriors, I said. Colgrim shrugged. None of us have, not in our lifetimes. Don't get too impressed, said Sygex. The Sun Emperor has 5 armies, and even the least of them will outnumber us 3 to 1. I tried to imagine such a force, and failed. How do we defeat such a host? I asked. Sygex did not answer me, but led the Kohari to our place in the line before a stepped structure of granite blocks. Shriman corpses were impaled upon wooden stacks, driven into the earth at its base, and flocks of Korean birds circled overhead. A silken pavilion of crimson and indigo had been raised at its summit, but I could not see what lay within. Robed priests surrounded it, each one weaving intricate patterns in the air with their star-metal staves. I did not know what they were doing, but I heard an insistent buzzing sound, like a hive of insects trying to push their way into my skull. The pavilion's outlines rippled like a desert mirage. The pavilion's outline rippled like a desert mirage, and I had to look away as my eyes began to water. My teeth felt loose in their gums, and my mouth filled with the taste of soured milk. I gagged and wiped the back of my hand across my lips, surprised and not a little alarmed to see a smear of blood there. "What is that?" I asked. "What's in there?" Sygex shrugged. "A new weapon, I heard. Something the thaumaturgist found deep underground after the earthquake at Sabera." "What kind of weapon?" "Does it matter?" said Colgrim. "They say it's going to wipe the gold-armored dung-eaters from the world, even those thrice-damned god warriors." The sun was close to the zenith by now, but a shiver worked its way down my spine. My mouth was suddenly dry. I could feel tingling in my fingertips. Was it fear? Perhaps. Or maybe, just maybe, it was a premonition of what was to come. An hour later, the Shuriman army arrived. I had never seen such a host, nor even imagined so many men could be gathered together in one place. Columns of dust created clouds that rose like a gathering storm set to sweep the mortal realm away. And then, through the dust, I saw the bronze spears of the Shuriman warriors, filling my sight in all directions. They marched forward, a vast line of fighting men with golden banners and sun disk totems glimmering in the noonday sun. From the slopes above, we watched wave after wave come into sight. Tens of thousands of men who had never known defeat and whose ancestors had conquered the known world. Riders on golden mounts rode the flanks as hundreds of floating chariots roved ahead of the army. Heavy wagons the size of river barks bore strange war machines that resembled navigational astrolabes. Spinning globes orbited by flaming spheres and crackling lightning. Robed priests came with them, each with a flame-topped staff and an entourage of blinded slaves. At the heart of the army were the god warriors. Much else fades from my mind. The blood, the horror, and the fear. But the sight of the god warriors will follow me into whatever lies beyond this moment. I saw 9 of them, towering over the men they led. Their features and bodies were an awful blend of human and animal, and things that had never walked this world and never should. Armored in bronze and jade, they were titans, inhuman monsters that defied belief. Their leader, with skin as pale and smooth as ivory, turned her monstrous head towards us, enclosed in a golden helm, carved to resemble a roaring lion. Her face was mercifully hidden, but I could feel her power as she swept her scornful gaze across our line. Our army shrank from the scale of the enemy force, on the brink of fleeing before even a single blow was struck. Steadying shouts arose from our brave leaders, and an immediate rout was halted. but even I could hear the fear in their voices. I too felt an almost uncontrollable urge to void my bladder, but clamped down on the feeling. I was Kohari, I wouldn't piss myself in my first battle. Even so, my hands were clammy, and I felt a sickening knot forming in my gut. I wanted to run. I needed to run. We could not possibly stand against such a force. "Big bastards, aren't they?" said Colgrim. A nervous laughter rippled through our ranks. My fear lessened. "They may look like gods," said Syjax, his voice carrying far and wide. "But they are mortal. They can bleed and they can die." I took strength from his words, but I wonder if he knew just how wrong he was. "We are Icathians," he roared. "We are the heirs of the kings and queens who first settled this land. It is ours by right and by birth. Aye, we are outnumbered, but the warriors our enemies have sent are slaves and men whose only loyalty is to coin." He raised his weapon high, and the sunlight shone from its polished blade. He was glorious in that moment, and I would have followed him to the very end of the world if he asked me to. "We fight to live in freedom, not in slavery. This is our home, and it is a land of proud people, of free people. There is nothing stronger than that, and we will prevail." A cheer began in the Kohari ranks, and was swiftly carried to the other regiments in our army. "Icathia! Icathia! Icathia!" It echoed from the rising walls of our city, and was carried to the Shriman host. The god warriors spoke swiftly to their attendants, who turned and ran to bear their orders to the wings of the army. Almost immediately, our enemy began to move uphill. They came slowly, their pace deliberate. On every third step, the warriors hammered the hafts of their spears on their shields. The noise was profoundly unnerving, a slow drumbeat that sapped the will of we who were soon to feel the tips of those blades. My mouth was dry, my heart hammered in my chest. I looked to Syjax for strength, to take courage from his indomitable presence. His jaw was set, his eyes hard. This was a soul who knew no fear, who rejected doubt and stood firm in the face of destiny. Sensing my gaze, he glanced down at me. "Egg?" he said. A pair of peeled eggs lay in the palm of his hand. I shook my head. I couldn't eat. Not now. "I'll take an egg," said Colgrim, taking one and biting it in half. Syjax ate the other, and the pair of them chewed thoughtfully. The Shrimans drew ever closer. "Good egg," nodded Colgrim. "I add a dash of vinegar as I boil them," Syjax replied. "Makes them easier to peel." "Clever. Thanks." I looked back and forth between them, unable to reconcile the mundane nature of their words as an all-conquering army marched upon us. And yet I felt soothed by it. I laughed, and that laughter swiftly spread. The Kohari were laughing, and soon, without knowing why, our entire army was laughing. The fear that had threatened to undo us all now fled. Fresh resolve filled our hearts and put iron in our sword arms. The Shrimans halted 200 yards from us. I tasted a strange texture through the air, like biting on tin. I looked up in time to see the spinning globes on the war machines burn with searing light. The priests attending them strapped their staves down. One of the flaming spheres detached from the globe and arced through the air towards us. It landed in the midst of our infantry and burst in an explosion of palisade green fire and screams. Another spear followed, then another. I gagged as the smell of roasting flesh billowed from the ranks, horrified at the carnage being wrought, but our warriors held firm. More of the spheres arced towards us, but instead of striking our ranks, they wobbled in the air before reversing course to smash down in the heart of the Shriman spearmen. Amazed, I saw thaumaturges holding their staves aloft, and crackling lines of magic flickered between them. The hairs on my arms and legs stood up in the shimmering air, as if a veil was being drawn up around us. More of the searing firebolts launched from the Shriman war machines, but they exploded in mid-air, striking the invisible barrier woven around our force. Cheers overcame the cries of pain in our ranks. I let out a breath, thankful that I had not been among the war machine's targets. I watched this piteously wounded man dragged to the rear by their comrades. The temptation to remain there must have been tremendous, but we Icathians descended from the explorer kings, and not a single warrior failed to return to their place in the battle line. The strain on our mages was clear, but their power was holding the Shuman barrage at bay. I glanced over my shoulder to the pavilion atop the pyramid. There too, the priests were straining with all their power. To what end, I could not imagine. What manner of weapon lay within, and when would we unleash it?